Thank you and good evening. My name is Greg Marecki. I am privileged to serve as the president of the University of Chicago Alumni Board of Governors, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today to this evening's Harper Lecture. I'm delighted that everyone is able to join us for this opportunity to dive into some good old-fashioned University of Chicago scholarship, as well as having a chance to relax and socialize. So it's great to see everybody here today. I've got a few folks I'd like to thank and recognize before we get going. I'd like to thank any fellow ABG members, any Alumni Schools Committee members, Alumni Club of Chicago board members, and visiting committee members who have joined us today. Their support is critical in advancing the University of Chicago's mission. If I could ask you to stand and have a round of applause. I know you're in here, so do stand. Thank you for admitting to it, Narni. I appreciate it. Okay. I'd also like to give some special recognition to some local heroes here in the audience today. As many of you know, the Alumni Board of Governors presents Alumni Association awards, and I just want to flag a few of those for you tonight. And we have one of the award winners who is with us and hopefully will admit to being an awardee. So first off, Howard Gottlieb is a graduate of the college in 1947. He's going to receive the Public Service Award this June for being a major contributor to the extended arts community in Chicago. Kathleen Abbott, my friend Kathleen Abbott, is going to receive the Alumni Service Award for her continued leadership with alumni and student programming. She's been very active in both the Bay Area and now here in Chicago. And finally, I'd like to invite Sean Ahmad to stand. Sean is a graduate of the college from 2006, and he is a recipient of the 2015 Young Alumni Service Award. Sean started Go Maroons with several classmates during his undergraduate studies, and he was the sports editor of the Maroon paper. And Sean was able to leverage his ties to the university athletic teams and did a lot of online broadcasting and found a way to deliver live commentary to alumni, parents, and friends. And for that, we are going to be giving him a Young Alumni Service Award. I'm happy to say that Sean has broadcasted, I think, over 400 games, University of Chicago games. Over 300. I always round up, so it's 400. I always round up, it's 400. If it's 301, it's 400. So thank you. A round of applause for Sean. So before I get on to introducing our featured speaker this evening, I just want to express a lot of excitement. These are, as you may be able to tell, tremendously exciting times for the University of Chicago. I graduated from the college and the law school back in the 1990s. I won't say exactly when. And at that time, I think it's safe to say that the University of Chicago had a stellar reputation for intellectual rigor. We thought we were the best in the world, certainly at the time. And now I think it's fair to say that everyone else agrees with us. The reputation has been substantially enhanced over the last 20 years. There is no doubt that the University of Chicago is a world power in higher education. And so many of you have asked me, what is the Inquiry and Impact campaign all about? This is a new campaign that we launched in October. And the purpose really, you could talk about it for hours, but I won't do that. Just want to tell you briefly, the job of that campaign is to give the University of Chicago the resources that it needs to be able to be the best university in the world. The very best professors, the very best facilities, and the very best students. I like to say that if I applied to the University of Chicago today, I probably wouldn't get in. My wife tells me that all the time. So, and other thing about this campaign that I think is so special, and I really encourage you to think about, it's more than about just raising dollars. That's the usual campaign, raising money. This campaign actually specifically aims to deepen engagement between the University of Chicago alumni and the actual institution. That's part of the goal, right? That's in fact the most important goal to the Alumni Board of Governors. Our goal is to connect with over 125,000 alumni in the next 5 years. And there's only 160,000 of us around, so it's going to be a pretty ambitious goal. And our other goal is to drive towards 1 million engagements between you and me and the University of Chicago. Every time you come to a Harper lecture, every time you visit Reunion, every time you log on to the U of C website and use the directory, these are all points of engagement. So we are delighted that the University of Chicago has chosen to be the first university in world history to be able to launch a campaign like this, and we are confident that we will succeed with your help. It's a very big, very ambitious goal, but of course that is exactly the kind of goal that University of Chicago graduates like to go after. So that's enough about the campaign. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Dana Suskind. Dr. Suskind is a professor of surgery and pediatrics and directs both the 30 Million Words Initiative and the pediatric cochlear implantation programs at the University of Chicago Medicine. She is an advisor on Hillary Clinton's Too Small to Fail initiative and part of the White House initiative on creating a pathway to ending the achievement gap. Welcome, Dr. Suskind.
It's my pleasure to be here tonight. Let me just get situated. While I want to tell you more about the research program, 30 Million Words, that I run at the University of Chicago, even more, I want to share the reasons that it exists and the powerful science that underlies it. Tonight, we'll be talking about baby's brain development and the most powerful, underutilized resource of this country, that of parent talk. While 30 Million Words was designed to help solve the problem of the achievement gap, that is, to change the outcomes for millions of children in this country who will not be able to reach their potentials, the longer-term purpose of 30 Million Words is to help ensure that the country into which these children are born is able to reach its potential as well. It will come as no surprise to you that the children of this country are not doing well. The widening economic gap is mirrored by a widening achievement gap between children born into poverty and their more affluent peers. Our country, the land of opportunity, a meritocracy where hard work and sacrifice meant that you could provide a better life for yourself and for your children, is but an empty promise. The millions of children who are born on the wrong end of the economic spectrum are those who are less likely to go on to university, more likely to drop out of school, whose entire school careers will often be marked by struggle and failure. To put it in perspective, if you were born poor today in the United States, your chance of having age-appropriate cognitive skills in the 3rd and in the 8th grade is 19%. That means that 80% of children born poor are not able to learn at age-appropriate levels. If you are an African-American male in Chicago public schools, your chances of graduating from high school are 1 in 2, 50%. Although I have to give a lot of kudos to Chicago because they're actually really moving this needle. Your chances of graduating from a 4-year college program, not even 10%. In fact, according to James Heckman, the Nobel laureate, by the age of 5, you can predict who will graduate from high school and college and who will not. The cognitive differences that we see at the age of 18 are in fact no different than the ones that we see at the age of 3. The gap is there before they enter kindergarten. Nobel laureate states, school neither increases it or decreases it. Where does it all begin? In fact, by the age of 9 months, you can already start seeing differences in cognitive ability. And this, where's my little? You can see that by 9 months, they're already 0.1 standard deviation difference. By the age of 24 months, that gap almost triples. By the age of 3, children from low-income backgrounds will have half the vocabulary than their more affluent peers. Their first day of entering school, approximately a 50% chance of being school ready, meaning ready to learn. These statistics are staggering, not just because of the early effects on the individual child, but because of the numbers of children that we are talking about. While there are certainly no absolutes tying these statistics to socioeconomic levels, and certainly there are many children from low-income backgrounds who are able to surmount the odds, there is no question, though, that there is a correlation between socioeconomic status and the achievement issues that we are seeing, which makes the following statistics that much more disturbing. In the United States today, nearly half of all children, that is 32 million children, are living in low-income homes. 65% of African, Native American, and Hispanic American children, and 32% of white and Asian American children. Who are these 32 million children? They are tomorrow's America. In earlier years, of course, the answer to this issue would have been easy: genetics. It's how they are, and that's just the end of it. But just as scientists successfully debated those who opposed the idea that the Earth was round, because certainly when you looked out into the horizon, it sure did look flat. So too, because of scientists and their rigorously tested studies, we now know that the Earth in fact revolves around the sun, the moon is not made of cheese, and the human brain is marvelously malleable, absolutely dependent on what it encounters in its first 3 years of life. Now, there's no doubt that genetics plays a role and provides a ceiling for all of us in various spheres. For example, I will never be as smart as Nobel laureate James Heckman in math and economics. But there is a huge discrepancy between being able to reach the heights of one's potential and being trapped at the bottom in all possible spheres. Until now, the majority of attention has really been focused once the problems began, when children enter school. While physical health is attended to from day one with well-baby checks and measurings and vaccinations, attention to early intellectual growth has largely been out of the purview of professionals. It has only been recently that we've become aware that brain development from day one is so critical to lifelong achievement, and that waiting until a child enters school is simply too late. Let me make this clear. I believe strongly in the money being invested from preschool up into high school, even beyond. Better and more accessible are important components to our children's future. But to make sure that the money is not simply being directed or remedial, directed at children who are having difficulty learning, a redirection in our focus must occur. We have to begin setting the stage for learning for all of our children. In order for that to happen, we must have active involvement from our educational system, beginning at birth, with specific programs for children, specifically vulnerable children, from day one until they enter school. You are probably wondering why exactly a surgeon is up here talking about educational disparities and even social policy. It was in fact my experience in starting the cochlear implant program that allowed me to see the tremendous power of early language environments, what I like to call parent talk, on the academic trajectories of children. But before I go on, I want to tell you, and this is because I'm giving a Harper lecture, that I don't think that I would be here on this journey, nor built the research program that I lead, at any other university than the University of Chicago. And I know my team rolled their eyes when I said this, but the truth is only at the U of C could a surgeon be so supported enthusiastically at a place like this. It is for this reason that I'm incredibly honored to be here giving a Harper lecture. 8 years ago, I started, 8 years ago, you're going to see her, she's so cute. I started the pediatric cochlear implant program at the University of Chicago. A cochlear implant, as many of you all know, is an incredible piece of technology that allows a child born deaf the ability to hear, to talk, and really meld into this world both educationally and socially. This is a little girl who was born deaf.
This is my cochlear implant. This the whole frame because and this helps me to hear.
And let me tell you, her life is going to be very different. But it wasn't long after I started the implant program that I started noticing that the implant came with an asterisk. And what I discovered completely changed the course of my career. While all my patients had similar potentials, that's true, I soon noticed a disturbing difference among them after implantation. Some would be talking and reading on par with their hearing peers, while others, same time out, would barely be able to communicate. And that difference almost always fell along socioeconomic lines. It was an incredibly painful difference to see and watch. The question, of course, was why? And it was that question which really made me step out of the operating room into the world of social sciences. And trust me, for a surgeon, that is an incredibly long, long journey. One of the first places I stepped into was, in fact, an undergraduate class at the University of Chicago, Introduction to Child Language Development. I remember that bitter Chicago winter, often running late, from clinic across the quad into this antiquated auditorium. And you probably remember one of those steep, inclined auditoriums with desk chairs that funneled down to the podium where the professor lectured, in this case, Dr. Susan Colden Meadow. I do want to make a statement that there's no better way to realize that old neurons don't fire as rapidly as young ones than being like surrounded by a bunch of U of C undergrads. It is humbling. But I sat there waiting for the answer, really happy that I was auditing the class rather than taking it for a grade. And I got it. I got it from a study done almost 30 years before. Betty Hart and Todd Risley, that's Betty Hart in Juniper Gardens, were child psychologists at the University of Kansas in the 1960s during the War on Poverty. They were determined to solve the problems that they were seeing in poor school readiness in the children from the Juniper Gardens Housing Project. Hypothesizing that language development played a critical role, their project included a vocabulary-intensive preschool intervention, not too dissimilar from our current focus on preschool. Forgive me, I consider that this is sort of history repeating itself. At first, they seem to have found the answer. The vocabulary of the children increased significantly. But by the time the children entered kindergarten, the gains had disappeared. It's something called fade out. And the children looked no different than those who had not received the intervention. Why? In order to find out why their initial project had failed, and hypothesizing again that language development played a significant role, they decided to go earlier, to the 0 to 3 space. In truth, I think that Hart and Risley were true pioneers for just asking the question why, because it departed so drastically from the thinking of the day. It's all genetics, which would have made the Juniper Gardens results the answer rather than another question. In their book, Meaningful Differences, Hart and Risley describe the striking disparity in language environments of children born into low-income backgrounds. While there was certainly a gradation from highest professional strata to the low SES welfare group, both the differences and the effects of the differences were unmistakable. What Hart and Risley found was that by the end of the age of 3, children born into low-income backgrounds will have heard 30 million fewer words than their more affluent peers. And this is right out of their book, Meaningful Differences, where you can see by the end of the age of 3, a 30 million word gap. But the truth is, the differences were not simply quantitative. It was the way the children were spoken to that was strikingly different as well. Most importantly, the ratio between prohibitions and affirmations, that is positive versus negative feedback, and the ratio of business talk, that is put your shoes on, go to bed, eat your food, versus what they called extra talk. Look at the pretty yellow flower and it smells so sweet. Incredibly, these differences how and how much parents spoke and interacted with their children were correlated to vocabulary differences at the age of 3, whereby children from the low-income backgrounds had half the vocabulary than their more affluent peers. And this is just an example from their book. But I think even more importantly, what they found was by the 3rd grade, the children there were impacts in both vocabulary, IQ, and test scores at the 3rd grade. What made these results even more striking, though, was that it wasn't socioeconomic per se. Children born into poor homes where there was rich language environments reflected the importance of language, and those from affluent homes that didn't have the rich language environments also reflected the importance of language. So now I understood the implications of the asterisks. While cochlear implantation could bring sound to a child's brain, something else was needed to make its miraculous potential a reality: words. I had given all my patients the same ability to hear sound, that's true. But for those children born into homes where there was less parent talk, the critical sounds that the brain needed to make those connections just didn't exist, and their brains didn't realize that the sounds they were hearing were meant for communication. Realizing this, for me, was really the next step in my scientific journey. I love surgery, there's no doubt, and it is a tremendous honor each and every time a parent places their child in my arms to walk back to the operating room. It is a tremendous privilege to be able to give a child the ability to hear. But I realized that taking the Hippocratic Oath didn't mean that my obligation ended when the surgery ended. It ended when my patients did well. This is just a picture from today, actually, of one of my cutest patients, they're all so cute, who received her implant at about 8 months of age. And when you ask her how old she is, she says, dos, because she's bilingual. Her life is going to be dramatically different. This realization, combined with what I had learned about why some children didn't do as well as others, resulted in our first initiative to help ensure that all my cochlear implant patients would have the same opportunities, called Project Aspire. And that might have been the end of it, if I hadn't soon realized that what I was seeing in my patient population really just mirrored what was going on for so many other children across this country, with equally devastating effects. Some may consider the use of the term devastating too harsh of a word, but not if you consider what we're talking about is a lifetime of a child, born just as we are, into environments where choice is just the luck of the draw. For those who are born into rich early language environments, their potentials are on their way to optimal realization. For those children born into poor language environments, even with the same potential, the chances of realizing those potentials are minimal. Why? And this is Kristen Leffel, who is part of my team. As we discussed earlier, evidence of poor language environments can be seen as early as 9 months. By the age of 3, children living in poverty will have half the vocabulary of their more affluent peers. To really understand why parent talk has such a powerful effect, we need to understand how the incredible brain develops. The brain, unlike almost any other organ, is unfinished at birth. The heart, the lungs, the kidney, well, they function from day one as they will for their entire life. But the brain is almost entirely dependent on what it encounters in its full ride to development. Inside that incredibly cute, lovable newborn is an intellectual core on the brink of incredibly rapid, complex, and intricate growth. The ease with which we learn, the design of our entire lives, are essentially predicated on what happens in those first 3 years. Why is this? Well, within the first 3 years of life, 80 to 85% of our physical brain, the potential of 100 billion neurons, is developed. You can translate that into a lot of potential. Unfortunately, without the critical neural connections, those 100 billion neurons, well, they're relatively meaningless, sort of like freestanding telephone poles without connections. During the early years, the brain creates 700 to 1,000 new neural connections per second, 700 to 1,000. In no other time will there be such rapid brain growth. As these neural connections occur, they build an extraordinarily complex neural circuitry, which really becomes our brain architecture and the foundation for all of our learning, affecting all of our brain function, including memory, emotion, behavior, motor skills, and of course, language. This is a very important time for brain building, because it is during this time that a circuitry, which is remarkably strong, or dangerously weak, or somewhere in between, is created. And it affects our lifetime of attainment. Why is that time so critical? Why can't we do it later? It really comes down to something called neuroplasticity and pruning. Oops. The brain's profusions of neural connections, those 700 to 1,000 neural connections per second, well, if they remained, it would result in our brain being a chaotic overload of noise and stimuli. So the brain, in an effort to really become a much more efficient and streamlined machine, begins to prune itself, sort of like a gardener with a rose bush that's been overgrown. Through this neural pruning, the young brain begins to trim away superfluous neurons, weeding away those that are unused or weak, and fine-tuning those that are especially used. It really just shows you how incredibly smart our brain is. But the positive effect of pruning has a downside as well. It decreases our neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the term that describes the brain's ability to learn new skills easily. It is the hallmark of both youth and of potential, something I don't have. From birth through 3, neuroplasticity is at its optimum for language learning. Everything a young baby does or learns during these early years is at its easiest. But once the brain decides what's essential and what is not, and begins to prune itself, acquiring new skills narrows perceptively. It's not to say that it's ever too late. It just becomes significantly harder. And it really makes clear what I was seeing in my patient population. After all, if their brains weren't hearing much language, it thinks, well, why are these neural connections important? Let's just weed them away. I mean, I can tell you firsthand that implanting a child at the age of 6 months versus 3 years is a lifetime of difference in outcomes. It makes clear why you and I will have more difficulty learning a new language. And most importantly, it explains why young children who are born into language environments which are not rich or are poor will have much more difficulty learning in school. And this is why the early experience of a child, from birth through 3, are so, so important. Because this is the time when the critical neural connections are being created and the potential for cognitive skill building and verbal learning is at its peak. We only have one time to build it right. So what are the 2 key factors driving these neural connections? Essentially, genetics and early experience, and their lifelong effect on each other. While there's no doubt that genetics, which supply the basic blueprints and rules for all the interconnecting nerve cells, it can't be discounted. Achievement of innate potential, science really truly indicates, is the critical factor. Achievement of innate potential, science strongly indicates, is largely determined by a child's earliest language environment, that is, parent talk. That's essentially it, for better or for worse. It's the foundation of who we are. But early language environments doesn't simply build skills. It builds a fundamentally different brain, a slicker and more efficient brain. Some of the most exciting research that is coming out of Stanford is Anne Fernald, where she looks at the language processing of children who are exposed to different language environments. And this is just an example from one of her studies where she does something called a looking while listening task, where a baby has a monitor in front of them with a doggy on one side and a cat on the other side. And a recording will say, "Look at the doggy." And she'll record how quickly the child looks at the doggy. Milliseconds of difference in looking at the correct answer demonstrates a huge difference in opportunity to learn. And what she has found is profound, that children exposed to poor language environments are slower language processors, and those who are exposed to richer language environments are faster processors. In truth, when we think about exposure to language environments, it's not just about building a larger vocabulary, being ahead in the race. It's really about becoming a faster runner. What she found in this slide is that by 18 months, right, low income, there was a difference between low SES children, socioeconomic status children, in their language processing. By 24 months, the children from the low socioeconomic status were a full 6 months behind their more affluent peers. But on the flip side, similar to Hart and Risley, what she found was that it wasn't socioeconomic per se. Those children from rich language environments who didn't hear a lot of language, well, they were slower processors. And those from poorer homes with rich language environments were faster language processors, which really shows that ultimately language exposure is all about the brain. I'm going to get, whoops. Excuse me one second. In truth, exposure to language impacts every crevice of who we are. The science demonstrates that it's not simply cognitive and vocabulary skill building. It builds your literacy and pre-literacy ability, math and spatial ability, a child's ability to self-regulate his behavior, even a child's perseverance and grit. It truly impacts who we are, and it impacts the whole of the child. And when it's not there, it impacts the whole of the child's academic trajectory. It is the root cause of the achievement gap that we are seeing today. On the flip side and on the positive side, parent talk is one of the most powerful, underutilized resources in this country. And it was on the basis of this that 30 million words was born. 30 million words is based on the power of parents. The power of parents through their words to build their children's brains from the moment that they're born. Our research program at the University of Chicago develops and tests parent-directed interventions really to allow parents to enrich their early language environments. The long-term goal of our program, though, is a population-level shift, where all parents across this country understand the power of their words in shaping their children's future. We want the idea of the power of parent talk to really get into the groundwater, to become second nature, and then to turn into action, like wearing a seatbelt or putting your baby back to sleep. There are two very important points that I want to make before I go into our program. First, while we're discussing socioeconomic status, language, and lagging achievement, it does not reflect a difference in love of parents. No socioeconomic group has cornered the market on loving their children nor wanting their children to be happy and successful. Within every parent lies the words to help their children get on the right academic trajectory. There's another important point. That it is something that I actually saw firsthand when I began working with the incredible mothers on the south side of Chicago. To say that being poor is difficult is the greatest of understatements. There are many, many things that impact a child's home language environment. Families without stable homes, living in violent neighborhoods with unstable employment or child care must be supported so that they can invest in their children. It's not as simple as saying, go talk to your child. We need social policies that invest in parents, in children, in communities, so that parents can invest in their children. When we advocate for the power of parent talk, we must also advocate for parents. With that being said, what exactly are we doing at the University of Chicago? We have many different programs in the midst of research and development, but tonight I'm going to focus on our flagship program and where it all started, our 30 million words home visiting program. The home visiting program is actually a multimedia curriculum that's facilitated by a home visitor with one-on-one sessions with parents in the home. Over the course of 6 months, parents and home visitors, really as partners, discuss scientific concepts, they develop and practice skills, and they monitor their goals, all with the sole purpose of enriching their children's early language environments. We've actually designed this curriculum so that it can be adapted by existing federal and state home visiting networks who work with parents from underserved communities. With that, with an eye truly to scalability, we've developed it with a computer-based platform, really to allow scalability across the country. The core tenets or approaches of our program is really threefold: to impact knowledge, to impact beliefs, and ultimately to impact behavior. Our curriculum is a melding of multiple scientific disciplines that's been incredible to build, including brain development, child development, adult learning, even Carol Dweck's growth mindset, which really refers to the influence of parental beliefs about intelligence as to whether it's fixed or whether it can be grown. The 30 million word strategies are demonstrated to parents via animation and real parent video. They're easily understood and easily accessible and easily embedded into everyday routines. It's important to stress, though, that our approach is culturally unbiased and culturally sensitive. It does not seek to change parental values or idiomatic speech, but really to enhance parent-child interactions, which have been scientifically linked to school readiness. Most importantly, 30 million words is dependent on parents understanding two key facts. First, intelligence is not set at birth. And second, they are the prime architects in their children's intellectual growth. Think about it for a second. How would your approach to your children change, or even to life, if you didn't believe that you could impact it or that you could make a difference? What if you felt that your child was either born smart or not, and there was really nothing that you could do? There's, in fact, a robust literature demonstrating that how you feel about intelligence, especially if you view it as fixed, that it changes fundamentally how you interact with your child and your environment. And this is how we actually start our program. This is the discussion that we begin with. I'm going to show you a very short interaction from the beginning of actually the first module that really gets at this idea. Each of these children has a child your child's age. Just by looking at them, whose child will be the smartest? I think it's the left one. If I showed you what they do for a living, does your answer change? We've had many who say the doctor's child is at a deficit, which is probably true. What if I showed you how much they talk with their children? What if I told you right now that the janitor's child is ahead of the rest? How can we tell? This little exercise doesn't just simply give the home visitor an indication of the views of the parent. It really probably, for the first time, allows the parent to critically reflect on his or her own views on intelligence. Because there's a prevalent thought out there that a child's intelligence is all about their genes or how much their parents make or what their parents do for a living. But there's a lot more to that story. Becoming smart is very dependent on an important factor, And of course, the key word is becoming, because in fact, intelligence is developed. And a critical factor in that development is how much parents talk and interact with their children in the first few years. So after we set this baseline up,
when you say a word, it enters
me. Went too quickly. That intelligence is malleable. Next, we really help translate the science, because I figure if a surgeon is impressed by the science, so will parents. And this is how, we show how words grow your baby's brain.
When you say a word, it enters through your child's ear. The brain hears it and grows a connection for that word. Book. Ball. Moon.
Now, I have to confess, this is not exactly how it happens. But since you're USC alumni, I figure you would realize that. But it is incredibly concrete and compelling. One of my favorite anecdotes is one of the home visitors tells the story of one of the mothers coming back, and they were talking about, how did this week go? And she said, I feel like I built a lot of brain connections for my baby. And I think that's incredibly powerful, because I think that drives so much, love is the most important thing, but I think it drives a lot of what we do. So, once parents understand that intelligence is malleable and the incredibly important role they play in the development, how do we translate that knowledge into action? When you think about a rich language environment, and you really think about it scientifically, it is an incredibly complex construct. It is incredibly complex. It's so complex that it would be overwhelming to any of us. So what we've done is we've streamlined it into something that we call the 3 T's. Tune in, talk more, and take turns. This is the measuring stick for everyday interactions. Tune in is probably the most nuanced of the T, and it's really reflective of the parent-child relationship. It includes using a rich, warm tone, something called child-directed speech, following your child's lead, really tuning in into what your child's interested in. Talk more? Well, talk more is just as it sounds. It's narrating your child's day using rich vocabulary. And lastly is take turns. Take turns is really viewing your child as a conversational partner from day one, responding to every hiccup, burp, and gesture. And these 3 T's are the core behavioral construct that go through all of our curriculum. It's the measuring stick that parents can use when they're changing their baby's diaper or getting ready for dinner. And these 3 T's go through our entire curriculum. This is just a very brief overview of our home visiting curriculum. But what you'll see is we take all the different ways that science has demonstrated to us that language can get a child ready for school and funnels it through the 3 T's. So we have weeks where we talk about how language grows a child's behavior and really helps shape their behavior. We have weeks talking about encouragements. We have weeks talking about storytelling. We even have weeks about using math and spatial language, which has been demonstrated to really impact math and spatial ability for children when they first start school. And I'm going to just show you a very small snippet from our home visiting math week. So you can imagine being in the home environment, a home visitor working with a parent, and they're talking about, talking about shapes helps build your child's math foundation, which I actually didn't realize until I started doing this research. There are shapes everywhere. First, tune in to what your child is focused on, talk more about it, and then take turns about talking about that shape. We then show them, and there's obviously lots of discussion, and then we show them real parent video, which we've worked very hard to be reflective of our whole country, not simply one segment, because the importance of language is a universal. So this is a little video snippet.
Do you want to empty out your box so you can sit in it? Oopsie.
What do you want? You want the bowl?
La 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 la. Yeah. Put your remote in the green rectangle. Yeah. That book is a rectangle shape too, just like this box.
Whoa, what is that? What is that? It's circle, like a ball. Whoa, it's like a ball. Look, it's like a circle.
Look, I see rectangles on the windows. I see those. And then look, you see those things on top of the roof?
Yeah, I can circle.
Yep, exactly. Those are circles. I think I see a triangle.
Rectangle. Thank you.
Yeah, don't that bush look like a triangle?
Yeah.
It does. This is a triangle, right?
Come on. You can go more.
You gonna show me more? What you gonna show me?
So this is just a little snippet. Our curriculum are rich with animation and video. So that's really the sort of the educational curriculum aspect of the home visiting program. But within our program, we have what we call behavior change strategies to really help parents move that knowledge even more into action. And one of the favorites is something that we like to call quantitative linguistic feedback. Actually, I think I have an example where we use this. You see that little purple device going into the girl's shirt? That's actually like a language pedometer, or I guess a language Fitbit for today. What it does is it counts the number of words a child is exposed to, how many conversations, even how much television is in that child's background. And what it does is it really makes concrete what is a pretty nuanced idea. I mean, I don't even know how many words I'm speaking tonight, and not many of us don't, but what it does is it gives parents a mindfulness, and we use it as an opportunity for goal setting and for assessing how parents are enriching their children's language environment. And look, I actually brought one. Oh, here we go. Here it is. So it goes into a child's shirt pocket. And this is just an example of how we use it. They get these feedback reports so that before they start the program, they do their baseline, where they do 3 recordings so we can get an idea of the hourly adult word count and the hourly conversational turn count. And you can see each week they do a new recording and they goal set. So it's a powerful thing. But we're at the University of Chicago. We believe that science can really help make change. And I believe that science should be and can be the basis of real social change. So as compelling and as exciting as 30 million words is, it is meaningless unless we're able to demonstrate the impact on the developing child. It's for that reason that science and the randomized control trial are really the heart of the program at the University of Chicago. And with that, as a result, it really helps us in designing and testing our programs. So that home visiting program that you saw, it wasn't that we just said, oh, this is a great idea, let's go make it and scale it up. It's been a step-by-step process ensuring that what we're designing is actually impacting in the way that we want. We started off with a very small randomized control trial, which is basically half the group gets the intervention and the other half gets a nutrition intervention, and it's random, so you're ensured that it's not biased. And what we did was we did this small RCT, which to make sure that this crazy idea actually had legs. And so our RCT thankfully had great promise. We were able to show during the intervention, really these are just the LENA results. There are many other results. But we can see that during the intervention, parents' conversational turn count went up 50% from baseline. Obviously, you can see this is the control group. They stay very flat. After the intervention stopped and they no longer got feedback, they dropped, there's no doubt about it, but they were still 30% above baseline. So this was enough to tell us, yes, there's promise here. But I think what's more important than being able to say, oh, there's promise here, which is important, is to say, what did we learn from this intervention to make it better? Because I think there's a real problem when we say, when we get too attached to anything that we've developed. Because I think the only thing that we can be attached to is the long-term vision for equity. These are just vehicles to allow us to get there. And what did we learn? We learned some really amazing things. We learned that we actually, after the intervention was finished, we brought all these mothers back, which was powerful in itself. And we learned that they wanted to know, they wanted to have feedback for longer periods of time. One mother said, it's great that I can understand how my words grow my baby's brain, but how can my words help shape his behavior? So as a result, we listened to her, and in TMW 2.0, we now have behavior aspects where they learn about children's behavior and executive function. So it's important, and the beauty of being at the U of C is that we're able to do this, that we can continue to build stronger and stronger programs to really affect social change. As a result, we're now involved in running a longitudinal 5-year study where we're going to be able to see, does this intervention not simply impact children at 4 months, but when they start school? And this is being done in partnership with the Chicago City Ready to Learn and generously funded by PNC Grow Up Great Foundation. But reaching one parent at a time makes a difference in one child's life at a time. But to really narrow this gap, we must reach all parents to really create a population-level shift, which is ultimately our goal. A country where all children are given the same opportunity to reach their potential, where the tremendous power that parents hold and the critical need to support them is understood. There are no silver bullets, I know that. And I don't believe any single intervention will solve all the problems that have a lifetime of impact on children's achievement. That would take a magic wand. But for change to truly occur, the absolute importance of parent talk must become embedded in our social fabric of our nation. The importance must become a conversation on maternity wards, physicians' offices, early language centers, churches, schools, and most importantly, among parents. The message of parent talk must be intersected at every aspect of a young family's life. It must be a surround sound. And that's actually what we're doing. We're developing a coordinated set of behavioral interventions which can really overlay onto a community. I can easily envision a citywide 30 million words initiative supported by an interactive web platform, sort of like a Khan Academy, that offers accessible, evidence-based curriculum for early language programs and parents. This is just to show you what we're doing in our lab right now. As I mentioned, the home visiting program is in the midst of a large-scale trial. We've developed and are testing a newborn intervention so that when all babies are born and they get their newborn hearing screen, they understand that why we're doing this is because language is the food for the developing brain. We have a pediatrician intervention where when babies come in for their 2, 4, and 6-month visit, they learn about the power of parent talk. We have many things that we'd love to do on the horizon, working with daycare and Head Start providers, public schools, libraries, the list goes on. But really, to me, the most important part of 30 million words is that it's parent-driven. As I said, our parents are active and proactive participants in changing the language environments of their children. They understand completely the importance of this change. And they understand that they are the ones that are the catalyst for change. Our team is simply their backup support. In that way, 30 million words does something even more. It provides a sense of social activism in these parents, because ultimately this is their power and their message to spread. I'm going to show you a very short video with Sammy, who's one of the fathers who went through our program with his son Blake, because I think he really articulates much better than I do the ultimate vision of our program.
I have a few friends that have young kids, and I've taught them what I've learned at TMW, to tune in, talk more, and take turn concepts. My friend Tay came over with her daughter Shaniqua, and Shaniqua and Blake was both sitting on the floor playing with toys. Shaniqua had a Barbie in her hand, and I pretty much got down on the floor and tuned in to what Shaniqua was doing. And my friend Tay asked me, like, Sammy, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm tuning in to what she's doing, and she wanted to know more about it. I told my friend Sarah in Indianapolis about it. She has a 2-year-old son. I told my friend in Atlanta, Georgia, Chiquita, about it. She has a 2-year-old daughter. When I see my friends doing some of the things that I taught them, and just to know that they're gonna teach it to their kids and their kids gonna grow up and teach it to their kids is all a big accomplishment.
You want to have a good relationship where your kids will always want to talk to you, and what better way to start but to talk to them?
The benefit of telling people about the program, that everybody's kid will have a jump start when they go into preschool or go into first grade, and their test scores will be up. And we won't have to worry about no kid left behind, because there won't be a kid left behind.
I think spreading the words about TMW is important, because if I tell one friend, and that one friend is going to tell another friend, then that one friend is going to tell a group of people, which is kind of like the domino effect, and we'll have a world full of smart babies running around.
So in conclusion, and I'm sorry I went over, while we at 30 million words are determined within our population to try to change the tragic waste of human potential, what we really hope to see is a national appreciation of this need, so that the wasted potential of millions of children become part of history. We want talking to your child to become part of the narrative, the American narrative, from a child's first breath to his or first day of school. We want all parents to understand the power of their words in impacting their children's future. And for those children, for those parents who need support in making this happen, I'd like to see appropriate programs. Because in our country of enormous resources, there are too many children who will start school not ready to learn, and who will continue to lag their entire lives. These children are our children. We want for them what we want for the children born directly to us: the ability to reach their potentials and their ability to lead stable and productive lives. I'd like to just end off by thanking my incredible team. A special thank you to Kristen Leffel, Beth Suskind, and Ashley, and the whole team. And I thank you. That's it.